Coming at you from the OLR podcast studio.
It's really more of a basement.
Coming to you from the OLR basement studio.
But it's still a podcast.
Coming to you from the podcast basement studio.
Yeah, but you still need to say OLR.
Coming to you from the OLR podcast basement studio.
Oh, that's way too many words.
Coming at you.
That's not enough. You still need to say OLR.
Let's just start. It's OLR.
All right, join us tonight on One Lane Road Podcast. It's me by myself, Lucas, a little under the weather, so just be me tonight interviewing Scott Maddux, owner of Smoky Mountain Harley Davidson in the Shed, Smokehouse, and Juke joint. How are you, man?
I'm good, Dustin. How are you tonight?
I'm good. Like we were just talking about off air, is crazy winds here in Middle Tennessee and in East Tennessee, so we'll try to not stay on too long. Just no telling. Our trampolines already went off the hillside, my wife said, so I'm sure the kids are pissed. So all right, so yeah, just I've been a big fan of yours and what you're doing up there in East Tennessee for many years. I've been coming to shows up there. What a lot of people don't know is, when they talk about the Shed and the operation, the Smoky Mountain Harley that you got, that a lot of people don't realize you're from the Upper Cumberland area originally. Is that right, in Baxter area?
Yeah. Grew up in Baxter, and that's where my family's from. My parents still live in Buffalo Valley, which is right there in Putnam County and Smith County line. And grew up there in Baxter. Went to Upperman High School, so really familiar with a lot of the areas around that area. Gainesboro, Byrdstown, Jamestown, all those were always our rivals, when we were growing up playing sports.
And still very much today. I think there's not a lot of, when Upperman and Cookeville was in the state tournament here just last week, there was not a lot of people I worked with from Cookeville rooting for Upperman, surprisingly. So still very much a thing, yeah. When I did my research, I didn't have to do a whole lot, like I said, because I've been coming up there for so many years, but I tried to not listen to anything that Steve Burgess said last weekend.
Well, that's hard. He can get in your ear pretty easy if you let him.
Yeah. Seen him in a few shows up there over the years. Of course, you're a good buddy. And Cat House Profits, I'd like to talk about that at some point, just to touch on that.
Sure.
You guys did a little projects there for a while, and so when was the move? Like, when did you start eyeballing something from Baxter to Maryville? A lot of people in life go through their life and don't have anything they're passionate about, and for you to take two things that you're passionate about, Harley Davidson, motorcycles and music, how did you incorporate two passions and fortunate enough to make a living out of that?
Well, Dustin, I was really, really blessed in a lot of ways. When I was living in Baxter and working in Baxter, I was in the telephone business, utility construction business, and when I got out of that business, I ended up selling my interest. My father and I were 50-50 partners, and we sold that business to a company out of Texas. And I was going to stay there and work with them. That was my plan, and I'd committed to stay there 3 years. And after just a little short period of time working there, I realized that I wanted to get back into being in business for myself. I enjoyed that a lot, and I had some experience with that prior to Maddux Communications, and it just, I guess, once that gets in your system, it's kind of hard to get out. So I was thinking about things that I would want to get into and want to do, and I've been a motorcycle enthusiast since I was at a young age, probably 7-8 years old. It's when I got my first motorcycle. I got a little Honda 50 for Christmas, and then somewhere probably around 11 or 12, around 12, I think I got my first guitar. And so those had been two things that had been kind of present in my life, since a very early age, and being a young person at the time when we sold Maddux Communications, I was still in early 30s, and I thought, man, if I could figure out some way to get into one of these areas, it would, you hear that old adage, people say all the time, do something you love and you'll never work again.
Sure.
And I thought that, I was going to try that out and see if that was true. And so I started contacting Harley Davidson, and at the same time, I was kind of dabbling around on the music side. You mentioned Bird Dog earlier. He and I had been buddies and played music together for a number of years, and never really thought I'd be a performer so much as I thought maybe I could, use a little bit of the business background and get into some artist, relations, artist management type stuff, and just fortunately got a call, one day from Harley after I'd been kind of talking to him for a period of time, and they offered an opportunity for me to come in and interview for a new market they were going to open up. And long story short, it wasn't Maryville. It was in northern Kentucky, and my wife and I prepared for that, and we went up and interviewed and got that offered to us as an opportunity to open a dealership, and was moving full steam ahead on that, and just some twist of fate, got a chance to. I was asked if I would want to do that in Maryville, Tennessee, rather than London, or rather than Florence, Kentucky, and which was a real blessing, because I was real apprehensive about moving that far north. I didn't really want to leave Tennessee. And so, that's how Smoky Mountain came. And from the very beginning, my thoughts were, if there was some way to blend those two together, the music side, by having, sort of that being an entertainment element of the business, then, I felt like that would make a lot of sense for me personally. And that's how it started. The very first day the Smoky Mountain Harley Davidson opened, in 2004. We had bands there that day, and we had the shed. The shed was there. Of course, it looked much different than it looks today. Much different version of what it is today. Yeah. From that point forward, the shed was equally as a part of what I was doing, and just really fortunate to be able to have a good business like the Harley shop to support the music side, because the music business is it is a passion, and it took the shed a number of years to gain footing, where it could really operate on its own. I remember many times we'd be standing out there. There would be a half a dozen people standing out there. I mean, I've stood out. You can believe it or not, I've stood out there with 50 people listening to Sturgill Simpson play, or Chris Stapleton, in the early days when, when people like Stapleton didn't have a following either, or Sturgill didn't have a following. And when I think back about the history of the place, those are some of my fondest memories, thinking about how, we would have those type of artists, when they were traveling in a, 15 passenger van with half miles on it, Yeah.
That's great, man. I really never knew that part of the story. I knew kind of the backstory and never really knew how you got there. What made you pick Maryville. So that's definitely a Baxter boy. That's a much more attractive place to be. 2 hours away from home as opposed to all the way up in Kentucky in a random town. But I remember a lot of those early days, and I wasn't sure about who you had. I was doing everything. You opened in 2004, more like local towns those first couple years. Is that right? But I was trying to think when the first year I came to a show, and I know it wasn't the first 2 years.
Well, when we first opened, I was really focused on blues music at the time, because you could kind of afford blues music. So I worked with a number of touring musicians that were out there, putting together records, writing really good records, but they were in that genre of music. And the tough part about blues is that really is probably, unfortunately, one of the most underappreciated genres of music that's out there for an artist, or at least it was, in the early 2000s. It may have changed some today. And so we would have those people that would come through. I wish I could rattle off all the names. I remember some of Jason Ritchie and Damien. I can't. I don't even start naming names. Yeah. But we had these really great musicians that were coming through there that they just couldn't attract a larger audience, but we were building a base steadily, and I think part of what I was proud of is that we were really focused on trying to have real relevant artists come in, and we would have tribute bands and local bands too, but we were really trying to accommodate the musician that was out there trying to get their music in front of new audiences. And I guess, I can remember the first big show I had, what I would consider to be a big show. I had Big Head Todd and the Monsters play, which that was just a favorite of mine from ever. And, those guys, I had gotten to know them over the years because I'd just been around their music, back from the early 90s, and then had struck up some friendships with them. And they played. And even that show was a pretty small one. I think that was our first anniversary show, So we'd been in business a year, and I look back at some of those photos and just what the stage looked like. They just flew in. They didn't even, they're from Boulder, Colorado, so they weren't on a routed deal, and they were just playing instruments that I had. I had an old drum kit and a couple of guitars and stuff, and I look at that, and it's just so funny to see it. And then just oddly enough, somewhere around 2006, Derek Trucks had just come up with a new record, and somehow or another, through I guess those blues connections, I found myself talking to his agent, and I booked Derek Trucks, and it was right. I mean, he was just the same week he was playing the Shed. He was on the cover of Guitar Player magazine, and his record was getting a lot of critical acclaim. And that show was just an incredible show. I think we had maybe 1,200 people there that night. We'd never seen a crowd anything like that, and music was great. The band just performed just flawlessly, and that was really that was our first big show. And then from there, we started kind of shifting genres a little bit more into Americana. Sure. And really a lot like blues at that time, Americana was very underappreciated. So, I could bring in legends like Billy Joe Shaver or, Ray Wylie, Fred Eagle Smith, or, you could, James McMurtry, those top artists, I could afford to bring them, into the Shed. And even though it was something we could afford, it wasn't always economically, it didn't make sense because, it would surprise me. We'd have Billy Joe Shaver there and, we still, would be struggling to draw a crowd. But every year when we would bring those people back, we would see the crowd grow a little more and a little more. And I think over time, people started to get some expectation that maybe if we had an artist coming that it was worth looking them up maybe and listening to their catalog. And I think, over time we turned some folks on to maybe some music that was off their radar that, over time became some of their favorite artists. So, I mean, Ray Wylie Hubbard, for example, one of my favorite artists. And when Ray first started playing this, I mean, he was kind of just starting to resurge, at that point. He was well off the radar. And then, he had that record Snake Farm came out and he sort of caught a second wind. And Ray's played at the Shed every year since then. And it's been, it's been great. I've got to see his son grow up. I mean, first time I met Lucas playing with Ray, I think Lucas was probably 15 years old, and, now Luke 27, 28 years old. And great accomplished musician in his own right.
Yeah, and that was actually the one name I was wanting you to touch on a little bit was Ray Wylie, because he was one of the first ones that I remember, and it kind of I don't want to say put you on the map, but that's one of the first names I thought was like, oh man, he's got Ray Wylie coming in, but you're absolutely right, because even these little smaller shows that I'm doing down here in Gainesboro that I'm promoting, I mean I've only done a handful. But my goal is always to find an artist that I believe in, that I love to hear, and share it with the audience. And a lot of my inspiration for doing that. And I know you may not know this, but You may or may not, because I picked your brain a couple times at, after shows or during shows up there at your shed, and I just said, man, what's it take to do this? And it's been a while since I asked you, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but that's when I first started doing smaller shows, and it's just really cool when you can turn people onto an artist. And I remember meeting you, I think it was probably 06 or 07 through Jeremy Hammer, who was one of your original employees there as a mechanic. Mm-hmm. He's from right here. His mama lives about 2 minutes from this studio,
Yeah.
And I met him through you, and I was just starting to really get into a lot of stuff on the music side. And first show I ever saw there was Cross Canadian Ragweed, and all those early Ragweed shows that were just insane there.
Mm-hmm.
And your relationship still with Cody, I think he was the last show I saw before COVID right there at the Inside.
Yeah, well, that show, if that's the one, if it's the one I'm thinking of, was that the one where Blackberry Smoke opened for them?
Oh, well, I'm talking about the last show before COVID, where the Departed. Yeah. But maybe,
okay. I can that one with Cross Canadian. I mean, I think it might have been. I'm pretty sure it was the first time they played at the shed. Blackberry Smoke opened for them, and and that is an epic show. That is probably, if I had to think about what one of the most epic shows that we've ever had is with that particular one, because I had seen Blackberry Smoke open for ZZ Top just a few months earlier, but I'd come in very late to the show. It was a Knoxville show over at the theater in Tennessee Theater, and me and some guys had ridden over, and I don't know, we might have stopped and got sidetracked on the way over there, and just didn't get there for the opening act, and caught the end of it, and then ended up getting those guys as an opening act for Cross Canadian.
Jeez.
And man, they came in and absolutely smoked it that night. I mean, they did a flawless show, and it's just everything was right. Played 9 songs. I mean, it just came out just punching one right after another. Just all the energy Blackberry Smoke has, they had. They had then. And our sound man then, which was our sound man for a number of years, was Mark Akers, and we always recorded all of our shows. And we didn't multi-track them; we just recorded them. And Akers had spent a lot of time in the studio, so he really focused on getting a good mix on the show. So when we because we would go back and listen to them and enjoy, a lot of these bands later. A lot of times during the winter, that's what we would do: sit around listening to those shows. And that next day after the show, that next week, me and a couple guys had to travel up to Greenville, Tennessee, and we were picking up some old motorcycle part tools from one of the guys I work with's father, Shane Timon's father, and we've listened to that show a couple times, driving up there, and I ended up calling Brett, the drummer for Blackberry Smoke, and said, listen, you guys, you should release this as a live performance. And Brett and Charlie, those guys they're perfectionists about their music. And they said, well, if we can't mix it down, if it's just a stereo mix, they just sort of discarded it that it wouldn't. They would never release something that wasn't multi-tracked, and so we just started making copies of it, and I was giving it out as bootlegs to everybody. And it was crazy, because I would be in places like Daytona, and I would hear a bike come down the road, and they would be playing, one of those songs from that show, that particular bootleg. I mean, there's no telling how many thousands of copies of that bootleg got floated around. And then, over from that, it started building a lot of energy around Blackberry Smoke, particularly at the shed, and as you well know, I mean, this last year we had Blackberry Smoke. They did 4 sold out shows at the shed.
Yeah.
They've become, a band that has really connected with our venue in ways, like no other. They have a fan group that travels from across the country that comes there. It's called the Brothers and Sisters Reunion. They have every year. I mean, when I say across the country, I mean really across the world. I've met people that have traveled from Australia, from England, that have come specifically to see Blackberry Smoke at the shed. And it's just really cool to have that little piece. And when you talk about sharing music and getting excited about it, those are some of the things that really do excite me the most, because I know, what happened between the relationship of all of us, was just really something special. And I've been real thankful that those guys have remembered that, and they continue to play the shed every year. And it does feel like a reunion for sure.
Yeah. When there's two artists that pop to mind, like I said, we've just talked about them, and a girl, a coworker was talking about, she'd never been to a show, up at the shed. Her mother lives by close, and I said, "Oh, you've got to check it out." And she goes, "Well, I really want to see Blackberry Smoke." She goes, "Do they play there every year?" I was like, "Literally every year, the brothers and sisters reunion." And that's really cool because, Ray Wylie, to me, was the first big name that I remember seeing, and just kind of giving you that, bump from, like you said, when he hit Snake Farm there, it took a second surge, as you said. But Blackberry Smoke, would you say that's kind of the biggest? I know you've had bigger names per se,
yeah,
but they're really the ones. It's the partnership and the friendship that you guys have had. Now you got 3 straight nights. I've not known too many Thursday night shows that you've had, but that's how damn big they're getting.
Yeah,
the shows at your show. At your place. They can sell out the Ryman or whatever, but to have it at your business, something you created, and they were one of the first bands that latched onto you. And like you said, you're out there throwing bootleg copies. They may owe you some royalties for getting the name out there, Blackberry Smoke. You may have to bring that up. But, how does that make you feel, man? Ray Wylie pushed the early days, but, Blackberry Smoke now, 3 sellouts, basically. The Thursday will sell out. I know the Friday and Saturday already have, but I just...
I take it. It feels great. To answer your question, Dustin, it's awesome that what's become really awesome in those is that, we really formed a relationship that those relationships would exist even if the music stopped. And, like every year when they come, Charlie always comes and he stays with us, and now it's turned into, bringing his wife, and now that they have a young son, and so it's really cool to see those relationships. And then over the years, Brett and I are great friends. We talk pretty regularly, and his brother Richard, that he's a Harley guy through and through, loves motorcycles, and it's just really, really neat to see those kind of things happen. And I've enjoyed seeing that band, turn into what they've turned into. I remember, when they first showed up, they were in a 15-passenger van, a Econoline van with, 1 million miles on it. And then, I remember when they got an RV, they showed up in this RV that was wrapped, and somebody had wrapped it with Blackberry Smoke, man. You could tell they thought they were really hitting the big time. And then, they go to leave and the RV won't run. Stay in my parking lot for a couple of weeks while I try to get it fixed. And I've seen those guys develop into, not only just good friends, but great musicians and such a great following. And not to single anyone out, but it's impossible not to talk about, Charlie is now not only considered just a great frontman for the Blackberry Smoke. He's considered to be one of the top guitar players, out there in rock and roll. And he just recently was on cover of, Vintage Guitar, and, just a super guy and one of the greats.
Some of my fondest memories there, I discovered, as you said, putting some of these, not putting them on the map, but helping guys like me who maybe hadn't heard of them before. The first time I ever heard Blackberry Smoke was because of the shed. The first time I heard of Whiskey Myers was because of the shed. So when anybody asks me right now, what's your favorite venue to watch music at? My answer is always 2 answers. There's the Ryman and there's the shed. And that's just, that's just honest. I'm not just saying it because I'm interviewing you. It's just my favorite place to see outside music and just the atmosphere. One of the final Cross Canadian Ragweed shows was at your place, seeing Shooter Jennings for several years. But I think of the name that you said, probably my favorite, just because he doesn't do a whole lot. You had Sturgill Simpson early on, but man, that one you had in September of 2015, Jesus Christ.
Well, Sturgill he had gotten discovered at that point, and so that was a great thing to witness, because that was a sold out show, and people knew who Sturgill was. The first time Sturgill played there, we had him opening for a band they weren't really a tribute band, but it was sort of in some ways kind of like a almost a Vegas show type band that we had contracted to play for a rally. And I probably shouldn't tell the story, but I will. I hadn't been consulted on the band that to play for that, and so when I was told who we had, I was very frustrated, because I didn't really want that to be the headliner at a motorcycle rally we were hosting.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I'm going to get an opening act that is going to absolutely smoke them. And I'd been listening to High Top Mountain because it had just come out, and a friend of mine had given me a copy of it. And so we were wearing High Top Mountain, Sturgill's record. Sure. And reached out to Sturgill. They took a gig, and they needed a gig opening up, and it didn't matter who or where or how much. That's where Sturgill was in his career, and believe me, you know that record well. I'm sure you know what a great record that is. Yeah. It's not like Sturgill's any better today than he was then. Just people hadn't heard him, and we had him play, and it was like no one was hearing him. He was playing those songs, and the band was as good as they've ever been. And it was like me. I remember me and about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 other people were standing there listening to it, and we're looking around. And it's like everyone else was just in their own world. They were talking, they weren't listening to anything that was going on. And afterwards, we were hanging out and talking, and I told him then, I said, listen, man, I want to get you guys back to do another show this year if we can, and we did, and they played another show, and again it had a little bit more of an audience, but literally I bet there wasn't 200 people there. And then strange thing happened. I don't know where the switch got flipped, but they got invited to go out and play I don't know if it was Coachella or Stagecoach or maybe one of the two, but it conflicted with the third year when they was going to be coming, or the third show, and we had to well, we didn't have to. Their agents reached out to us and asked us if we, because we had them under contract at the time, if we would cancel that show and let them do it. And I told them, I said, yeah, I'll do it, but I want him to come back and play again. And that's when he came back. That when you saw him, I guess that was 15, and he did that makeup show for us, and which was great, and it was really, really great of him to do it. And it was one of those fantastic nights at the Shed. It was really good. But I'll tell you, none of them could compete with those earlier shows to me, because it was just remarkable that that people just weren't hearing. And the things that would happen after the shows, because those guys really love to play. And you mentioned Bird Dog and the Cat House Prophets. We had a little band that was playing music around that time, and I remember we had an epic couple of jams with Sturgill and Miles after shows and before shows. And one time before show, we were just playing Led Zeppelin, and he's an incredible rock and roll guitar player.
Absolutely.
And he knows all of those Led Zeppelin songs, and Miles could play the drums really well to him, and we had a little jam session doing that one time. And then after a show, I think it might have been the first show, they hung around there, and Bird Dog and McGill and Sturgill and Miles were all singing these old gospel songs and harmonizing, and Miles was playing the mandolin, and I'd give anything we would have had some of that recorded, because it was just such a cool evening, and you get a real appreciation for Sturgill and Miles for how diverse their musical tastes are, and how talented they are as musicians. Going from Led Zeppelin to the Louvin brothers, you know.
Man, that would be something to see. You don't realize what you're experiencing at the time until you look back into something like that. Like you said, you wish you'd recorded it or something, you know. And I love listening to Steve tell those stories. He'll catch me. Sometimes we'll be at a basketball game. Our kids are high school together, so we'll be at a basketball game. Supposed to be watching our kids, but we're over here picking each other's brain, telling old stories, and you know. And Sturgill, you'll get a kick out of this, and our listeners will probably roll their eyes because I've told this story so many times on here, but I'll give the quick version. I was at a greenhouse in Nashville in June 2012. It was Waylon Jennings' 75th birthday celebration. Shooter hosted it. Jamie Johnson was a surprise guest, and Shooter said, you guys aren't going to know any of these artists tonight, but in 5 years, you'll look back and say, holy hell, I saw these guys for free in a greenhouse in Nashville, you know?
Yeah.
And it was Sturgill, Whitey Morgan, and Justin Wells from Fifth on the Floor and Hellbound Glory. Of course, obviously, you know, Sturgill and Whitey have made it the biggest of those two, but Justin's had a great career, and so has Hellbound Glory. And Sturgill was the last guy, and that was a full year before High Top Mountain came out, and everybody was so hammered that was there, myself included. But I remember just putting at the end, you know, me and a girlfriend that my wife was already probably out, and I mean everybody was kind of done because the show lasted so long that night. But Sturgill did that opening line to a Waylon song. We were like, "Are you hearing this?"
Yeah.
and there was just, like you said, almost like very similar to the first night at the Shed. Just a few people kind of like who hadn't passed out or were just hammered. We're just looking around going, oh my God. And some of them were still talking. And then I didn't see a show again. That was, like I said, in 2012. And I didn't see him until I saw him sold out for you in 15. I just remember the crowd being so electric, and there was just a buzz in the air that night. He was stepping away from the mic and letting everybody just yell the lyrics back to him that night. That was a really, really cool night. A weirder show that I saw there that I'll never forget. And we can spend 3 minutes talking about it, or you can say move on. But there was a Chris Knight show back about 2009. that was my introduction. I'd known Chris Knight's music for 7 or 8 years at that point, but that was one of the first times I'd seen him live, maybe the second. And I got to host a show with Chris this past fall.
Yeah.
And I got to see a little bit what you got to see back in 2009, and love the music. The guy's a different animal sometimes.
Well, you know, it's that show has become a little bit of the lore of the Shed. Kind of fun. I got a call. I got a text from I don't know if you've ever met Waldo. Waldo's one of our good buddies. He's up at the Shed all the time.
Yeah.
He and Bert have grown up together. We've all were three, running buddies all through high school. Waldo texted me from the City Winery one night and told me that Charlie was telling the Chris Knight story from Charlie Starr.
Yeah.
Was telling the Chris Knight story from the stage, and it sort of threw me a little bit why Charlie would be telling that story. And then later, when I talked to Waldo, he reminded me that Charlie opened up the show that night. Charlie did an acoustic opening for Chris that night, so Chris was there. So yeah, I don't mind telling it. Chris was here just a couple weeks ago. Yes. He played inside the Shed, and we talked about it a little bit for the first time, since then. But as you mentioned, you interviewed him. So Chris is probably one of the very best songwriters I've ever heard.
Amen.
I mean, I'll say that to begin with. I mean, he can paint a picture through his words that can play out like a motion picture in my mind when I listen to those. And I've been listening to what record did they just re-release it? Pretty Good Guy, I think it was. Mm-hmm. Just came out, and I've been listening to that a lot and thinking about what a great writer is. And at any rate, so Chris, when he writes some songs like "It Ain't Easy Being Me," those come from a lot of experience. And that line where he talks about put him in a room with a big red button that says "Danger, do not touch." Quite the day he'll mash it down, and to watch yourself self-destruct. There's probably a little bit of truth in those comments, and that show you're talking about, Chris was pushing the button that night for sure.
Yeah, I remember him. Yeah. He said, "I got T-shirts and koozies and CDs, and I don't care if you buy any of them. Yeah, them damn bikers get the hell out of here." Whatever.
Moto tourists. Yeah, he started to call it damn moto tourists. Then he got on a rant about cats and drug dealers. He also got on a little rant. He didn't like that, and that was right before he threatened to kick the camera into our cameraman's face. So.
Now, I met him after the show with Jeremy. Jeremy took me back there and met him, and I said, "Hey, man, I'm just, don't want to take every time. Big fan, been listening to you for years. A bunch of my buddies from Tompkinsville, Kentucky, introduced me to your music back in probably 2000. Just want to, say appreciate your music." He goes, "Yeah, I know where Tompkinsville's at."
Yeah.
And that was about it. And I said, "All right, man," it just led up, for years I've told that story, just how he acted. I never had seen that before out of him. So, like I said, I've had him on the podcast here probably 5 years ago. But I reached out to Red 11 Music and wanted to bring him in. I thought, man, if I could get him in for an acoustic rate down here in Salina, down here in Clay County, Jackson County, they love him. And I said, if I could ever get him in for a show, hey, man, I'm going to bring him in. By all accounts, we had a great show, a great turnout. His manager, Jason Knight, his road manager, is a sweetheart of a guy. And I knew he was coming up to you guys. And this was in September. And I got there, and my sound guy said, "Dude, I done pissed him off. I was calling him Bubba. I said, 'Hey, Bubba, how's that sound?' He goes, 'Who the hell's Bubba?'" And, and I said, "Well, man, you better pick your A game up and quit call him Chris Knight. Don't call him Bubba," and it was an honor for me. Honestly, I can get on here and I could tell you a few stories. Chris is he's like you said, one of the most talented songwriters, one of my favorite musicians ever. And maybe if I didn't know he was a little ornery before last September, I'd be like, man, that kind of sucks that I didn't get to sit down there and pick his brain. But I kind of knew what I was getting into. And after the show, we had him a couple Miller Lights, and he was pretty laid back. And we were in the backstage area, and one of my sponsors, Lee J. Amonette, Eagle Auction, he was talking to him as well. And I said, "Well, man, while we're talking about old shows, Chris, I want to ask you about a show at the Shed in Maryville." And he goes, hell, I was pretty much just messing with them people that night.
I imagine he's heard that more than once, too, because it's funny. Because I know Jason. Jason's from Knoxville. Or he's spent a lot of time in Knoxville. I've known him for years. And, Jason every now and then tells me a few stories, about that getting brought up to him on the road. And I think and Jason's probably perpetuated the story too, because when we were in the shed the other night, even he was talking to somebody, and he was showing them the poster, and I'll mention that part because that's part of the funny part.
I was not going to mention it, but yes, please.
So at the end of the night, I was in a really good mood that night because the truth of the matter is, like I said, Chris Knight truly is one of my favorite artists. And I've taken motorcycle trips and gone all the way to Colorado with that being the only CD we've listened to. Like the trailer tapes, and just the all the way out and back. And so at the end of the night, he had a concert poster, and I had written the How to Win Friends tour on, and took it to him and handed it, asked if he'd sign it. And he looked down at it and he kind of mumbled, something, How to Win Friends or something other than signed it. And then he went on about his business, and I guess that must have resonated a little bit on him. And he came in and let me know he had enough friends. He wasn't looking for any more.
That's typical.
Yeah.
I had tried to keep everybody out of the backstage area, and he just was not wanting. I mean, COVID with everything going on, people, I understood he wasn't going to go out, and I kept having people like running back there, and I would try to get him out of there as politely as possible. And I think he was pretty upset by the end of the night, like I told this one guy, I was like, "You can't go back there, man. He's not meeting people. Just please stay out of there." And I went to the bathroom, came back, and that guy busted up in there, and
Yeah.
And I said, damn it. I said, we've worked for 6 hours to get him in a good mood. He was finally back here drinking Miller Lights, laughing and cutting up and making fun of the Shed show from 12 years ago. And I said, you went pissed away everything we've worked so hard on, to get him in a good mood. But, I wanted to talk about that. That's a great story.
But that's the thing about Chris Knight fans, that his songs are so good, and they're written from a perspective of Western Kentucky, Middle Tennessee, that anybody who loves who has any identity to these areas they think he's writing just to them. So sure. It's real easy for a guy or a girl to think that they're going to meet Chris and he's just going to say, oh yeah, I'm just like you. But I guess he's like I said, if you want to know Chris Knight, listen to his music, man. He tells you exactly who he is.
Yeah.
But thank goodness for him. I mean, he's one hell of a writer, and I do hope he'll be back. I mean, we'll have Chris Knight back again and again. I'm glad we can laugh about it, and it's doesn't turn into him, having a bad feeling about playing the Shed, because I like having him. To me, he's just a phenomenal writer, and if he never writes anything else again, he'll be one of the greats as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I can't pick out a bad Chris Knight record. Like when I was doing, a lot of people that didn't know him leading up to that show, I had people text me, "Hey man, if you could pick out just 5 songs, if there's a guy that doesn't know a Chris Knight song, give me 5 songs to start with." And I started looking at his collection, and I couldn't really pick out a bad song, much less a bad record. I mean, they're all so good. He truly is a legend, Kentucky legend. I mean, all in that Americana scene. And I was actually aiming to come up and see you guys that night. We were deep in the middle of high school basketball, and I didn't make it. But I was glad to see it was a sellout and a good night. So yeah, I'm glad he's not murdered anybody up there since 2009 for that show. Another one of my favorites, Jamie Johnson, played up there. It was also different cat, I'd imagine, but.
Mm-hmm. So Jamie's shows are phenomenal for a number of reasons. I mean, first off, Jamie has one of the best bands in the business. Yep. I mean, everyone he surrounds himself with is enormously talented and just soulful players and singers and great folks and Jamie's one I wish I knew better. I've met him and talked to him. He's a little aloof, but just super nice guy. He's always been a real gentleman. Every time he's been to Shed, one thing that is kind of interesting about him, he loves to play golf. So almost every time he comes there, they go play golf all day long, and he shows up and I every time I look at him, I think, you just don't strike me as a golfer. He looks like somebody who would be out cutting wood, but not necessarily playing golf.
First time I ever saw it online, I was like, I didn't put it together. I'm like you. He's out there in a pair of shorts and a polo, and I went, wait a minute, that doesn't look right at all. So of all the big names you've gotten over the years, and we've named a lot of them here, is there somebody that you kind of missed out on, like you got them, like they hit you hit that stardom, before you can get a hold of them?
Yeah, man. I tell you, the one that I missed that I regret the most is Tyler Childers.
Sure.
That is one that I wish we could get at the Shed. And Tyler now is he's really hard to touch. For whatever reason, and part of the reasons we just don't have the we never did form the relationship with him. And I can remember, and I had a chance. I could have got Tyler Childers. I that's my fault. I remember early on. Their agent he was just coming on the scene. We'd been listening to him, so I knew how good he was. And their agent, they had a fee that they were asking that I just knew we wouldn't be able to cover. He was just a little too. It was just a little too early in his career for him to be able to sell that many tickets. At that point, he would have probably been. He might have been able to sell 350, 400 tickets. But, I also knew how good he was. And that's the one that I regret, because I feel like I feel like, like just like what we were talking about with Chris Knight. I listen to Tyler's music and I think, well, how could we not like each other? Every song I listen to feels like I know the guy, and I know where he's from and his roots, and so I always think, if we would have had him at the Shed, maybe it would have been one of those artists, that we would have formed a great relationship, and he would, be playing there this year. But but
Perfect,
we have to give up. Hopefully one of these days we will get him, because, I'm sure he's got a lot of great records in front of him still.
It has a similar story to my Sturgill story. I had found Childers. I don't remember how, I don't remember where, but I just saw on Twitter one day he was playing Grimey's record store for an album release party, and I went. There might have been 75 people there, and everybody was jam packed. They moved out a section of records and put him on a bar stool, and he played. I've still got those videos and pictures. Kind of aloof, I said, "Hey man, he was playing the Basement East that night for like $8, $10." And I said, "Hey man," I said, "I'm heading to your show," and he just looked at me and said, "I'll be there." Yeah. It's kind of like you said with Chris, kind of a little bit aloof. But I'll give you one name that I think in the same genre as Tyler Childers that you could get right now. I just had a show with him in Gainesboro in December. He's a 21-year-old kid out of Kentucky named Cole Chaney.
Shoot me a link, so I don't forget that I'm heading out on a motorcycle trip in the morning, and that could erase a lot of things.
Okay,
so,
yeah.
Shoot me an email on that, because I'd love to listen to him. Yeah, he's off the radar. I haven't heard him. I
got him down here in Gainesboro in December for a room it was a small room because where we hosted the show at, but 70 people, and his manager. I talked to his manager actually today, and they're still looking to trying to book him for my music festival in October, and I think you'll really dig him. If you like Childers, I think you'll really like him. I'll send you a couple of names like that.
I'd love to, because I'll tell you that's one of the hardest things that I find today is how do you find that artist like Childers or Sturgill or whoever, that Brent Cobb's another great one. I love, and it's harder to find them, because it just seems like, well, part of it's just my life is different. My kids are getting older, and I'm trying to spend more time raising a garden than I am listening to records with the guys. So I'm not hearing as much music as I used to. So any chance, you or any of your listeners out there, get to share some music, that's how we learn about good artists, that's for sure.
Sure. I got a buddy, Addison Johnson, I emailed you about the other day. He opened for Nitty Gritty up there for you guys last year. I think it's pretty well received. I'd love to see him get back up there as well. He's killing it down here right now. He's been on some big tours. He opened for Chris Knight. He's going to open for Jason Eady. Jason Eady's another guy I think will do really well up at your market. So I'll shoot you a couple. There's one name in particular that I think that, and you and I talked about it a couple years ago, had you got him in, and Cody Jinks would have been a perfect fit for the Shed at one point as well.
Oh yeah. Cody Jinks would have. He's another one that sort of passed us by. We never got him, and then by the time we got there, we were a little bit late to the dance. I mean, he was already playing arenas at that point. It's tough. What's really tough is when you do get them, and when you really get it right. It never works from a financial standpoint. Yeah. I mean, I joked about Stapleton, but we had Stapleton. I think he's played the Shed 4 times, and I mean, never. It wasn't like we ever were paying him a lot of money, because Chris wasn't charging a lot of money then, but couldn't draw anything. The Sturgill was that couldn't draw, and I mean, there's a certain thing that you only get is just the personal satisfaction of saying, man, I was there on the early side of those artists, because it's tough.
It's quick, because I remember the first time I seen Stapleton was it was at the Marathon Music Works in Nashville opening. It was another Waylon tribute. These Waylon tributes, I can't miss those, because I find somebody new every time. And he was just opening for Shooter and Jamie and a couple of them, and he was walking the crowd. and meeting people on the crowd. And my wife, unfortunately, is a big Luke Bryan fan, and I had told her the Stapleton guy on the roster, he's written a song for Kenny and for Luke and all this, and so she wanted to talk to him based off that. And I talked to him. And he was a nice guy, and he went up there and said, "Don't you think it's Outlaw Bits got out of hand with Shooter?" And my jaw dropped. And I thought, "Holy shit, how have I not seen this guy?" This whole time. And so a friend of mine whose dad was big in the bluegrass and been around him with his old band with the Steel Drivers, and she said, "Oh, I saw you say you met Stapleton the other day. He's playing Glasgow, a month from now for $10. You should guys can come up." And I said, "Well, there'll be other chances. It ain't like he's going to just hit it big overnight." That was July. Fast forward to November, and he's winning CMA awards, and you can't go to Nashville under $200 to see him. And so it's kind of, and you able to claim that, all those early shows. So that's again, go ahead.
Back when we had Chris, then he you mentioned Steel Drivers. He had a band then called the Johnson Brothers. Yeah. And I don't know if you've ever listened to any of those records, but I mean, that was the second coming of Led Zeppelin. I mean, Stapleton has that voice, that's that plant that's every bit as powerful as Robert Plant's, and he had a smoking band that was playing with him. The only one that survived that's JT, his bass player, still with him. The guitar player and drummer, they didn't make the transition, into the Chris Stapleton show. But those guys were fantastic musicians, and they would come there as a rock and roll band. And then he would do some acoustic stuff, and at that point he would maybe do some of those songs like what's the one he wrote, difference between Whiskey and
Whiskey and You,
he would play some of those acoustically, and you would really hear that side of them. But I thought that he was going to make it as a rock and roller, and then turned out to make it. It was his version of country, which is, pretty rootsy. Oh, sure. And I still, even then, I think back, Chris, I'd got an early copy of that Traveler record, and I haven't had a conversation with Chris in a long time. He's really, become a big time guy. But even then, I was in touch with him, and I remember sending him an email. I couldn't sleep one night, and I had just gotten an advanced copy of that they had sent, and I told him, I said, "Man, this record is fantastic." And that Outlaw State of Mind, version, that was the one that I was expecting the record to be. When I thought he was going to have a record that was going to be like that, and not necessarily what Traveler was, but when I heard it, I knew that record was going to be I knew it was a great record. Is what I should say. I didn't know it was going to be what it turned out to be. But next thing you know, I mean, went from, literally, man. I mean, Chris Stapleton was. It's just so funny. He went from $1,000 act to $100,000 act
overnight.
Over the course of what seemed like overnight, it probably seemed like 20 years to him.
Sure.
But, it felt pretty doggone quick to me.
Yeah. And I'd imagine that's the same thing that Jinx, what Jinx is getting now. When I found out about him, his tickets were $8, $10, $12, and I just paid almost $100 to see him. Not too long ago. It's a special show, but I think it was like $60 or $70, I guess, but not on Stapleton level, but I just think it's awesome you guys can claim some of those early shows. But so anyway, I know we've talked longer than we originally thought, but it's just fun catching up on some of these stories. But so talk to us now. You got your 18th season at the Shed kicking off this weekend with Big Gun, one of your original, the AC/DC tribute bands that's been around with you for a long time. So just kind of give our listeners a rundown of what to expect this weekend, what to expect from now till September.
Well, I'll tell you, I'll give you good information on those guys. Andy's out of White County, the singer for Big Gun, and so I've known him for a long time, growing up there in Baxter. He grew up there in Cookeville, but from White County, and he's they are one of the best AC/DC tribute bands you'll ever hear. I mean, they absolutely nail it, man. They play the part. He's got the voice, and we always have them every year. He's been playing with for eternity, and they are always our season opener at the shed, and our season closer. They book in the shed. So, if you want, anybody wants to get out and come see some great music, that we got them this year. I don't have our lineup in front of me, so I'm not going to be able to even attempt that one out there. I don't know who I'll leave on that, but if you go to shedtickets.com, I think it is, or SMH-D.com and look under events, you can check out our schedule this year. And we're gonna have some new stuff this year. We've got some new artists that are playing the shed for the first time. There's some slots that are open from, you mentioned Whiskey Myers. Some of those bands are kind of transitioning now into starting to play arenas. And so, we're not going to have Whiskey Myers this year. They're doing a real big tour, some really big festivals. And so there's some slots for some new bands, and hopefully, some stories to tell about them, just like the ones we've had today, in a year or two from now.
We're calling in on my phone, so I don't want to get on the internet and mess up the interview here. But just some of the names I know. Yeah, you've got some of the regulars with Blackberry Smoke, and of course the 3-night set, June 9th, 10th, 11th. People already missed out on the 10th, 11th, sold out. There are tickets for the 9th left. You've got Wheeler Walker Jr., the controversial comedian, country star. He was just at the Country Music Hall of Fame last year with picket signs saying that Florida Georgia Line did not deserve to be in the Country Music Hall of Fame, which that's one I'm not real familiar with Wheeler Walker Jr. I'll tell you that. The day we announced that ticket so we're going on sale from him, I got a couple texts from people, and I didn't quite understand what they were texting me, and they were titles to his songs. And so, yeah,
what some of those texts were, and but I'll tell you, we've been selling a lot of tickets to it, and I've got a lot of people that really are interested in coming out and seeing that show, and so I think that's going to turn out to be a really interesting night for sure.
Yeah, I would imagine. I've never seen him. I heard a lot of his art. That's definitely one when my kids are in the car. The fast forward gets hit when Wheeler Walker hits the radio, but pretty talented. He's found his niche there. Cadillac 3 is there. Jackal, who's been there several years for you. I've seen coming back. There's some more rock. It's kind of like I said. I'd always come there for. You could always put me on the docket if Shooter was there, Cody Canada, any of the guys we mentioned before. But a lot of rock bands have hit your Puddle of Mud, Saliva, Lit. Just some bands I didn't really expect to see But I'm sure, I know the demographic is there for me. Your crowd probably likes that just as much as some of that country music you bring in.
Well, we'll see. I've got a manager this year, Paul Smith, that's running the shed. I've given him a little leeway on booking, just to see, what his tastes are. I don't want to just always dominate our playlist, But we still have a few open slots. We're trying to put together a few shows that I'm really wanting to get there. I got a handful of them that I'm hoping we still get put together. In some of the TBAs. Yeah,
I've seen several. Open still, and I'm excited to see. I always try to make it to at least one a year up there. It's a pretty good little. I'm pretty busy as well as everybody's busy. It seems like, but I always at least try to get up there for one show a year. I know when you're booking, when that booking agent or booking manager job, became available a couple of years ago, I screenshot it and sent it to Jeremy. I said, "Hey, buddy, we need to be coworkers." Which wasn't realistic for me with young kids here in Jackson County. But like I said, I've started doing a little bit of this on my own on the side here in Jackson County, bringing in shows, and I just love what you do, man. I really. I draw a lot of inspiration off of it, and I just think you do it better than anybody else around here. And I know a lot of people that's listening to this show, go up there and buy tickets every year, and they appreciate what you're doing. So I just wanted to kind of get you on here and tell your story, man, and everybody have a little bit more of a background other than just they go buy the tickets, drink beer, and eat that good barbecue, but they don't know the man behind the story sometimes. So.
Well, man, I appreciate it, and there's a lot of people, behind the scene for sure. There's a whole lot of us that have worked on it, and but thanks for the invite to talk about the shed, and hopefully we'll see you up here for a show or two.
All right, man. I'll be in touch about some of those artists as well, about trying to see if you're interested. So
please do.
All right, guys, that is Scott Maddux, owner of Smoky Mountain Harley Davidson and the Shed, Smokehouse, and Juke joint. Thank you for your time, Scott.
All right, Dustin, you take care.
All right, thanks, man. All right, that was Scott Maddux, man. That was a fun interview. Like he said off air to me, he said we planned on 30 minutes, and 30 minutes turns into an hour real quick when you're talking about something that you both love. And, I just think I admire the hell out of him that he's taken two things that he loved as a child and combined that. And anybody that's not been to a show at the Shed, man, you need to get up there. I've never ridden a motorcycle a day in my life, but once I go up there and see that cool place, it used to be a Lowe's building. That's why I didn't get to bring up to him. It used to be a Lowe's building, and he turned into the Smoky Mountain Harley shop, and it's an amazing place. But the Shed, I've seen it grow. I didn't get to mention it to him. They had an anniversary article maybe a couple years ago, the 15th anniversary, and just to see some of the pictures, how I'd forgotten how it looked when it first opened, when I was going there in 06, 07, whatever it was, seeing Cross Canadian ragweed, to what it's become now, man. It's just it's a sight to see. Catch you one of those shows again. Just get on their website. Plenty of good music coming. Still some TBAs. Really think you guys would enjoy it. But so Lucas is in the house. He's sick. He's got something going on. He was puking when I got here. So thank you to Lucas for coming out here. He's a trooper. We hadn't got to record much. I'd set this interview up with Scott a couple weeks ago, and I text Lucas, and he said, "Man, I'm sick. You're not going to believe this. I'm sick again." But he came out here and set up everything with me and for me, and make sure I got to do this interview. And it means a lot. And so if you listen, and I'll put this on social media, our next episode is be episode 200. So what I'm asking you guys to do, call my phone. If you have Lucas's number, call Lucas. Leave us some voicemails. We planned on doing a live show for 200. That's not going to happen in time, probably. Hell, at this rate, the much as we get to record, it may happen. We were hoping to do a live show. But what we're asking for episode 200 right now is for all you guys that are listeners, loyal listeners, leave us a voicemail. Leave a voicemail on my phone. Most of you probably have my number before you'd have Lucas's. But if you have Lucas's, you're closer to Lucas, leave him a voicemail. We'd love to play some of your messages here on the episode 200 of the One Lane Road podcast coming up very next episode. So anyway, thank you guys for tuning in tonight to number 199, Scott Maddux, owner of the Smoky Mountain Harley Davidson and the Shed in Maryville, Tennessee. And we'll talk to you guys next time we can get together. Thank you.